right, good morning. Welcome to the Thurston County Board of County Commissioners Board Work Session for Monday, October 14th, 2024, 9:04 a.m. My name is Ty Menser, Chair of the Board. Vice Chair Commissioner Wayne Fournier on Zoom, Commissioner Carolina Mejia to my left, and Commissioner Gary Edwards on Zoom as well. Public virtual attendance available on the Thurston County YouTube channel. We have a 2-hour block. I think it's primarily budget related, and so I'm going to turn it to the County Manager.
Thanks so much, Chair. Well, good morning. I want to start by giving a special thanks to our budget team. Worked very hard last week to put all the information together. Also want to give a thanks to our auditor team, especially Darren, who's been working closely with Summer on some of the fund balance information and sharing that information back and forth. So let's go ahead and put up the presentation.
Real quick, Commissioner Klaus having technical issues. It should be on
Okay.
shortly.
Thank you so much for that. Well, Commissioners, today what we're going to go through is the 24-25 midterm budget recommendations and decisions. What we've done is passed out a sheet that lists on high-level overview all of the requests. And based on the current budget situation of the county, we have some recommendations. Our goal is to go over this information today to then see if there's any questions that we need to do research on, then come back on Wednesday morning seeking a final decision. And Wednesday we'll pretty much review the same presentation minus any decisions or direction for research or questions the board has. And then we'll look at the end on Wednesday morning for the board to give us official direction to make a motion so that the budget team can continue to move forward with preparing the budget book. And with that, we'll go ahead and jump in and go to the next slide. So this is the budget slide that we showed you a couple of weeks ago, and it has, after Amendment 1, decisions that were made. It shows the county's financial position. Of most concerns, because we've been over this a couple times, is year 2025 and beyond, which shows that we don't have enough cash on hand to actually pay the county's bills, and so there's some adjustment that needs to take place. It was this slide that we looked at when it comes to the ongoing fund balance number for 24-25, and in the numbers we pulled and the numbers that the auditors team pulled, there was some room for us to connect and make sure that we were not too far off, because at that point I believe there's about a $7 million difference. Again, I want to thank the auditors team for their work in providing us some information and our team providing information back. We were able to dial that number in, and we'll show you what the new number is. And really it comes down to how we captured revenue and some of the expenses, but I understand that that's not untypical, because we are looking at it from a forecasting standpoint, whereas they're gathering the actuals. And that's where I give a special thanks to Darren, who was hustling, getting all the information together. And so effectively what happened is their number came up a little bit, our number came down a bit, and we'll be able to explain that in a couple slides when we look at the next forecast. Go to the next slide. We're going to look at the budget recommendations for the general fund. And these recommendations are really based from our perspective of to the commissioners' staff's recommendation that we try to keep our impact to the general fund at a minimum at this point. And so we know that there are a lot of different requests, various requests, and the items that we are recommending in this chart, some of them have funding sources behind them and some of them are necessities. We're going to go through this in detail. I do want to just give a special thanks to Dolly and Jennifer for their hard work and dedication. You know, the budget is always a process of gathering data and bringing it forward and then verifying the data. But in this context right now with TC Connect and the way in which reports are coming out after our migration, I just want to spend a second and give a real thanks to Jennifer and Dolly for how they're working in the system, pulling the information out, identifying sometimes when that information may not be right, circling back around and flagging it. And that's what we want them to do as our budget team. We want them to be committed to identifying if the original information changes a bit based on other information that's populating in or different revenue sources. And so I don't want to embarrass them, but it may be too late for that already, because I see shades of pink already coming on their cheeks. But this has been a situation where every single day for I think the last 2 weeks, I see them putting their heads together with Robin, with Summer, jumping into meetings with the auditors team, going back again, meeting with me. We ask questions. They're researching things, working with departments, and just wanted to give them, hopefully they got some rest over the weekend, but wanted just to give them a great big thank you on behalf of the entire county for what they've done so far. Jennifer's so modest.
There's a stage I can get on? Okay.
All right. So we have some maintenance requests that we can go through, the emergency management, U.S. Department of Interior grants, the non-department residential energy efficiency incentive program grant, the non-department multi-site solar feasibility study, the Sheriff Commerce TC Narcotics grant, and approve the COLA and benefits requests. Those equate to in 24, 7,000 increase, but in 25, a 1.357 increase. Just give a second here. All right, moving on to the policy requests. We have included here the coroner autopsy requests for that additional funding so that his account doesn't go into the red there. We have the Commissioner Housing repayment request, and that's not necessarily by choice, but that's because we're required to do that. And then we have a series of grants on the policy requests there. We go to the next slide and we can toggle back and forth if there are any questions here.
Can you, I'm sorry, can you just slow down for a second?
Oh, sure.
This slide, so this slide, as I'm understanding it, is kind of like must do. It's kind of like the.
These are our requests. Some of these have additional funding, but what we're going to see on the next two slides, Commissioner, are what our recommendations, based on all the requests you received the last week from all the departments. This is what we've condensed down as to our recommendations to approve, which means everything else would be not approved. And we've summarized that in this spreadsheet here.
Yep.
That has a pretty long list. Our desire is to go through this with you for information. Take any questions or concerns you have. We can research that and then bring it back Wednesday for a final decision-making time. So I'll go back, we're still on this slide.
I have a question, Chair.
Go ahead, sir.
So, the difference between what we've come up with, we've come up a little bit, the auditors come
Yes.
down. What's that number? I mean, we can talk about squiggly lines and stuff, but the public can't see that.
Oh, sure.
What kind of a number are we talking about that we're deciding to go with? And is it a compromise? That's.
Well, let's go forward a couple slides. I'll just, the 2 slides, there we go. So, Summer, I'll let you speak to the fund balance difference and what we came up with and what our work was.
Sure. So this new slide reflects that in 2024, the fund balance would be just over 30 million. In 25, it would be just over 18 million. And if you'll recall, the prior projections were showing that the fund balance in 24 would be roughly 24 million. And I believe in 2025, we were sitting at 12 million. I'm sorry, go ahead.
And I would say, sorry, Summer, it's not necessarily a compromise, Commissioner Edwards. What Summer and the budget team and what the auditor through Darren and their team, they're, based on the information that was presented about a week, 2 weeks ago, they're refining their numbers, identifying revenue sources and expenses, and that's what changed some of the projections here. So you want to speak specifically to some of the things we found?
Sure, yes, sir. So in my last communication with Darren, he had updated the September month-end figures. And so he was projecting his revenues slightly lower. And because the actuals are filling in for the expenses and the revenues, it's closing that gap a little bit. The last 3 months of the year for him are based off projections from the originally adopted budget, where we are forecasting the entire year and making those adjustments as we recognize trends not only in the actuals, but in the markets and from trusted sources. So this particular slide is not only reflecting changes in revenue and expenditure expectations, but is taking into consideration the recommend to fund and how that affects the expenditures and the revenues, the expenditures that are backed by grant revenues.
I think one of the important takeaways, Commissioner, is that still in 2025 and 26, you see the fund balance going down. In 25, we have enough cash on hand to pay bills, but in 26, it goes below what we believe we need to go. And then, of course, in the out years, it's still negative. Yeah, Commissioner Mia.
There'll be a new budget though for 26 and 27, right?
Correct, yeah.
So, sorry, my eye was stretching.
It does, the budget does that to us too.
Yes.
So this just so my brain can comprehend it. So this right here, that what we're seeing is basically with these recommendations that staff have put forward,
Correct.
and this is the impact.
Yes. So our goal is to finish the 24-25 budget with only moving forward with what we would recommend is the necessities of the midterm requests. And that gets us in 25 enough cash on hand. Then to immediately look at the deficit, the structural deficit in 26, 27, so that we can start having those conversations.
And is this with the reversions that, because one of the first recommendations was for us to revert, right? A lot of the decisions that we made during Amendment 1. So these are already in this with those reversions put in place?
Yes, if you look at slide 3 at the very top.
Go back to slide 3.
Back one more. Oh, there it is, yeah. So that is with the FJC being funded from the bond proceeds and then the general fund, the road fund going back to the general fund, reversing the First Amendment decisions for those two items.
Yeah, that infusion of cash helps us balance 25 to have enough cash on hand to move forward.
So we're gonna change the Amendment 1.
Yeah, those two decisions, yes. That's the recommendation, at least.
And when do we make that decision?
It would be on Wednesday.
Okay, so I think we were on slide 4.
Okay, any other questions at this point in terms of, if we go to slide 4, again, we're continuing with the policy level requests. We have listed there the auditor election revenue for extension records auditor position, the sheriff to Tenino law enforcement, the sheriff and Nisqually tribe equipment purchase, the IT FTE incremental sheriff request. And that's an item that we want to chat through with the sheriff. I think what we want to try to meet tomorrow just to talk through where that funding comes from. And is there possibilities for a public safety sales tax? You know, what I'll say about the sheriff department growing and its deputies, the support that it needs for not only its positions, but also for any new software that it brings on, is putting pressure on our IT department. So we're working with Sherry on trying to identify how do we keep pace with their support so that the support to the sheriff on the IT level doesn't lag or start falling significantly behind.
I guess my question on that would be, I mean, we're buying police cars, more gasoline. So why wouldn't we cover all other support items?
Yeah, that's what we're gonna be talking to the sheriff about in detail. We haven't had a chance to do that.
I guess I'm wondering about that conversation as to the why. I mean, it's just, to me, it's a given. We need to buy tires for the police cars, that we buy new cars.
Yeah, we believe it's a given. We just wanna sit down and talk through how that's gonna potentially impact. If it goes to the general fund, it'll increase IT's rates and it'll increase the county's contribution to general fund versus can we identify public safety sales tax, but we haven't had that conversation detailed, partly because the MOE conversation made some progress last week, and so.
Well, aren't we as a board gonna have to make a policy decision at some point, so we don't have to go back and nickel dime those issues? I mean, everything is gonna take more. We're gonna need more gasoline, more police cars, more uniforms. So I'm hoping we don't have to go back this and have a discussion every decision that we make, that we're gonna need to buy those items to support.
Well, I think the discussion is not necessarily about the increase. The discussion is about just the continued outworking of public safety sales tax. Now that the board has decided on what the maintenance of level effort is, we will talk about the accounting for that, and then we'll want to sit with the sheriff and make sure, based on everything he's tracking to spend in that fund, that the fund isn't overspent. We plan to bring back the MOE discussion for part 2, which will be the last part of how we're going to account for the dollars and then get final direction on that. And that should settle that. But there always will be a conversation internally about making sure that that fund is on track.
Okay.
Any questions so far?
No, I appreciate that effort because, and I see where you're coming from, Commissioner Edwards, but this project, if I call it that got us to having the public safety sales tax was such a coalition of different departments and elected officials working together.
Yeah.
That I want to do everything we can to try to keep that coalition intact, so we're speaking with one voice to the community as best we can. It may not be possible, but so far we're doing our best, and I want to keep trying to do our best.
I think we made progress last week.
Yeah.
That facilitated conversation. And so I think we're now just going to be looking on the public safety sales tax conversation, looking at how we account for it on the back end to make sure that there's agreement on how to do that the best way, bring that to the board for a final conversation, and that really should codify that conversation. Okay, so.
Real quick, I don't know if you're we just went through that top chunk.
Yes.
Can someone remind me, Sheriff Tenino Law Enforcement, what are we paying for there?
That's a contract with the city of Tenino to do, police services for them.
So we would be getting money, right?
Right, it's reimbursed from the city.
Oh, okay. Usually would have a parentheses if it was money coming in, right? I mean, it looks like an expenditure to me.
It's not an expense, is it?
It's both. We get revenue, we spend the money and we get reimbursed by the city of Tenino.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so it's in and out?
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions for the team? Oh,
I just wanted to explain that further if you guys had any questions on that. It's to cover the city of Tenino in the evenings, like after like midnight to 6 in the morning. It usually results in like 10 calls a year for the sheriff's department. So it's a it's a pretty good deal for everybody.
That's what I remembered. I was just trying to figure out the financial piece.
That's
Okay.
great. Yeah, great question. Then we have the internal service rate request here for central services, human resources, and information technology. Those requests total 1.8. We're really looking at those closely every year to manage how those are growing, and are they absolutely essential to grow in an environment where we're trying to reduce the impact on the general fund. Summer, you want to go ahead and explain the roundup here on the total?
Commissioner Edwards had a question.
Oh, yes.
My question on that is there a flat percentage that we are increasing those service rates?
I don't believe it's a flat percentage, correct
We
me if
have
I'm
to
wrong.
keep up with inflation in some fashion.
Right, but some of this is driven by not only additional services, but there could be additional positions that are needed to do work.
No,
Oh, the
this is only the
maintenance of effort?
maintenance lever. Yeah.
Why don't you go ahead and explain that then?
So the central service rates are a projection of what it will cost the central services, information technology, and human resources to provide the services that they currently do in the coming year. And they do an in-depth analysis depending on the type of service it is. So it's not a flat, it's not like, oh, it's gonna go up 5% or 2%. It's an analysis of every type of service. So if there's an anticipated increase that they've been notified about from the utilities, they add that in. Anticipated gasoline prices get factored in. ER&R, if you recall, is on a lag. So it's whatever the costs, the actual costs were last year.
Was it last year or 2 years ago?
It's last year is applied to next year. It's a 2-year lag. So the calculations are what they are. And for those rates that are prospective, there is also a reconciliation because these funds are prohibited from making a profit.
And Robin, correct me if I'm wrong, but additional staffing that's added to these areas will eventually be baked into the rate.
It would be at a policy level. Any new staff is at a policy level, so the board can review and approve and would be in a future rate, not in these rates.
Yeah, and
So
that's,
I'm sorry, but it kind of backfill Commissioner Edwards' point. Inflation's like built into that, it sounds like.
Somewhat.
Not
yes.
just like a,
not a
Not
percentage,
at
at
a general rate, but like at a
It's not a
target.
general percentage.
It's
a
more,
actual review.
like true cost of service, but as the true cost of service goes up, those rates reflect that.
So it's actually a
Awarded.
deeper than just saying, oh, inflation went up 5% last year, everything goes up 5%. It's a lot more
That's right.
targeted than that, based on all the different services.
That's correct.
It is, because also if there's more, for example, in IT, if they're taking on additional support, additional work there, that's all baked into it as well. So they're making sure that they're covering costs.
I mean, all the contracts that we have that are the cost of doing business are going up at least by the inflationary rate. So, I mean, it's not too hard to figure out that those companies, unless they're locked into a rate for a period of time, they're gonna jack their rates up. I mean, food service in the jail, it's gonna cost more. It's gonna go up by at least that. So I'm trying to figure, why don't we make it, I don't wanna make it sound simple, cause it's not simple, but trying to figure out every line item adjustment, it seems like we're doing a lot of extra work for what we can pretty much tell is going to happen. I mean, we know fuel costs are gonna go up, we know asphalt, whatever it is, I mean, it goes up according.
Right. So I understand it sounds like a lot of work, but it is, we're required by the state auditor and state laws and accounting rules to allocate costs according to a relevant, actual costs, according to a relevant cost allocation method. And we are, again, prohibited from making a profit. So we have to analyze the cost of things and adjust accordingly.
Commissioner Mejia?
Thank you. A question on the approved COLA and benefit request. I'm seeing two of them. One of them in the maintenance request and then the other one in the policy request.
Yeah, no.
Oh, so, so that is, the maintenance level, or is the, bargaining contracts that have already been approved? And the policy level
The ones
is
that haven't
a
been approved?
3% for non-represented employees that is at the discretion of the board. And a placeholder for the sheriff.
Where is that now, second number?
So one is under policy
Yeah.
request and then the other one was on page 3 under maintenance request.
Oh. But this one said, oh, okay, never mind.
So when we get to those are all great questions. Any other questions from commissioners?
A lot of questions, but I'm not gonna ask them right now. Go ahead.
Again, this is what the budget team is doing is looking at the out years on the general fund. And because of the challenging budget situation, is recommending the kind of bare minimum. And that's what we have before us when we look at the total general fund impact at 5.169. And then they have the offsets by revenue, one-time expenses, ongoing, and Amendment 1 rollback for 2024. And how that feeds into 2025 is that it's saying a 4.177 ongoing impact. And that's what adjusts the next slide, the forecast. Into the next slide. You can see that, you know, in 2025, we have enough cash on hand to do county business. In 26, it drops below helpful level, and then in the out years, that structural deficit that the red and the green lines show continues to be problematic in the out years. So that's what we're looking at right now, is that's part of the conversation for the recommendation. When we have, the rest of the presentation talks about all other funds. That's not necessarily where the problems lie for us. The problems lie here with our conversation about the general fund. So before we move forward, just want to see if there's any additional questions or perspectives about it.
What's, right on the very bottom on the right-hand corner?
Target fund balance?
Yeah, the green and red there. What's that?
Oh, that's the Zoom. That little green box and the red box?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not part of the
That's not part of
presentation.
the
That's part
slide.
of
Oh, okay, I just noticed it wasn't the same on my
yeah, no.
handheld.
That's the Zoom.
So just kind of looking ahead a little bit, we had a policy that we formed about a balanced budget, which really hasn't come into play because we had a balanced budget until the point where our fund balance was so, and the trigger for that was as long as we were at the target line, then it didn't really apply. So 2026 will be the first year where it applies. We'll have a fund balance below our target line. We'll have, then an unbalanced budget, which would be out of line with our budget policy goal. So, I don't know.
And that's where, Commissioner, we would say, as soon as Wednesday afternoon, we really start looking at what do we need to do in 26, 27 to align those so that we're not below our budget goal. And I think one of the things I'll say for the viewing audience is, especially the internal viewing audience of our county leadership, there's always going to be a question and a difference in what we're projecting and then what we actually bring in, because as departments get the appropriated amount for their budget, if they don't spend that amount and there's reversion, that comes back and that could feed into the fund balance. But that's not how we should balance our budget. We should anticipate that what the commissioners assign to departments, they're going to spend. And absent struggling to fill positions, which I know in the pandemic, coming out of the pandemic, filling positions can be a challenge at times. But what you're appropriating is the amount that you're saying you can go ahead and spend, and they identify they will spend. I believe that there's opportunity in this organization for us to dial that in based on what they're projecting to spend, what they will spend, so that we don't have such a large give back at the end of the year. But there's still a structural issue if you're spending way more than you're bringing in. And that's why in the projection in the out years, 26, 27, we start to dip below the dollars that we need to in order to operate effectively and to know we're going to operate effectively. So those are some points of considerations. Our goal would be to finish the 24, 25 by making the recommended decisions and any other questions or perspectives that the board would have to staff's recommendation. And then quickly look at 26, 27 on the methodology and philosophy that we need to look at so that we can start aligning our expenses and revenues, trending the expenses to a point where they're going to meet and our fund balance comes up so that we have enough cash on hand to operate.
Yeah, are you buying those lottery tickets?
I don't know, I might not have to participate.
Your retirement gift.
Just promise to give the proceeds back to them. And so again, the list we have here, this is everything, the budget team outlined everything that was requested, and on the side we have what is being recommended in this presentation, yes or no. We wanted you to have a high-level overview of things that staff are recommending to say no to. Because at the end of the day, staff recommendation is just that. It's really the purview of the board to make the final decision.
So just went through the list, and I'm wondering, any of the items that got recommended, do they have a general fund impact? And if so, which ones are they?
The coroner's office request for $225,000, because as the county manager pointed out, without that funding, they will be running in the red at year end. And then the $504,000 for the housing repayment.
Okay.
And we can go ahead and go through the list, commissioners. We'll highlight anything that's a general fund impact and redistribute it out.
One more question, if I may.
Absolutely.
And if I can also add the COLAs for 25, whether they are the approved COLAs or the placeholders.
Okay, so you said coroner, you said,
COLAs.
COLAs.
I've got a question while she's looking. I think she's gonna ask another
Those are
question.
summarized, Commissioner, on the bottom of page 4 and highlighted on the slide.
Are each one of these, okay, we've got, everything across there, we've got the title and the recommendation, all that. But we don't have a dollar amount readily available there that we're talking about.
Yeah, we can crosswalk that for you. We'll pull the
Well,
information.
I mean, for me, to look at this, it's fine to look at it while we're sitting here and going over it, but I like to look at it when I've got time to look at it.
Sure.
You're not talking about something else. And so if it just said 12K, 22K, 500K, I don't care what it says, just give me an idea of what that is, because that's a pretty complicated list if you think about it.
It's very complicated.
That is a roll-up of a prior packet that was provided to you last week.
Yeah.
This one has all of the figures.
Will we send that out so that you have it on hand? Because we know that there's a lot, and again.
I mean, and then you're looking at it on your phone and trying to figure it out. It just doesn't
Don't even
work.
try that.
Like in size 0.5 font, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. I had some questions last week as we were going through the budget, and I'm wondering, will they be addressed? I guess, when will they be addressed? I know that there were kind of hefty questions and
Yeah.
a lot of what ifs, so is it going to be addressed later on? So I'm not re-asking them over and
No,
over.
our team is tracking the questions. The question about the levy lid lift, we will talk about Wednesday afternoon. There were 3 other questions, I believe,
The
Robin.
retirement, leave buyout fund, we have ready for Wednesday, and the other 2 as well, I
Yeah.
believe.
Because some of those go into considerations for future and even maybe present budget development. We can talk through those in detail.
The coroners.
You did ask about the coroner's FTE, and I believe that you were meeting with the coroners.
Yeah,
So,
we,
okay, that
HR
looks
is
fine.
working on that. And I think we have a meeting coming up with the coroner to discuss the contract and the savings.
So my question, do you remember?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
I do.
We believe there's an opportunity to create savings there. We're just checking the numbers, and then we're also looking at the vehicle by which to facilitate. And there's some things that HR is going to work through with the coroner's office and our legal team.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Chair, we'll go ahead and move forward and look at the budget recommendations all at a time. And then, these recommendations are primarily looking at, I think what I'll do is, before I hand over to Summer and Robin, the budget team on these items, but these are looking at there being funding to cover these expenses. And so the impact isn't as critical as the other conversation. Summer, Robin, you want to walk us through slides 6, 7?
Sure, so the top section of slide 6 shows all of the maintenance requests that are recommended to fund. Your historic preservation, TCOM, shifting the ARPA funding, reinstating some extra help for TSST and juvenile court, the treasurer's debt payment adjustment, public works, water and sewer grant, and transfer costs, and then another treasurer debt payment adjustment. So there's a total impact in 24, it's actually negative 10 million, and then in 25, 7.8 or 7.9 million.
Is it possible, if not, let me know, but is it possible to go backwards on this one? Like, I know with general fund, we're basically saying no unless it's absolute minimum. But with other funds, is it possible to tell us what is not being recommended for funding? Because I'm guessing it's a smaller list in a way, because most of the other funds have, financial solvency.
Yeah, is there, Jennifer, are there things not being recommended in other fund categories? You don't have, if there are, then can you just summarize that? Yeah, we'll get that for you.
Because we can't really crosswalk it on this list, because
No.
it's not general funds, so separated.
There's some TST positions, and that was going to be my question of like, how are we doing on TST? Just kind of as a follow-up, because I know last year it wasn't looking too rosy, and so,
We'll follow up on the DST funding. Okay. You can go to the next slide. And additional recommendations, and I don't know if I want to put anything out specifically.
I think that the 3 IT positions, we wanted to discuss those maybe briefly. All of the recommended to fund on this item do not have an ongoing general fund impact, with the exception of the IT FTE remove end date, which is the project manager position in the IT department. And then there is a IT FTE remove end date for the EPM IT matrix position, which is essentially the position within IT that supports the budget team for the EPM budget module. That end date is December 31st of this year. And
one of them is the TC Connect support. And so we're working with Sherry on identifying how to fund one position with a revenue source that will not hit the general fund and not hit rates. And then our recommendation would be to extend the end date for the EPM IT matrix and not fill it, so that we can evaluate next year, 2025, where things land, and come back to the board, determine if we need to fill it or not at that time. We're just reluctant because some of these positions, as they trigger, it will affect the following year's internal rates, which causes for general fund departments for the county to have to support them at a greater level. And that's a little bit of a sensitive component if we're looking at how do we have budget containment conversations. Very thankful to Sherry for coming up with an approach that gets her what she needs without necessarily growing that at this time. And so the recommendation would be to extend the end date, not remove it, but extend it to 2025 December, and then have her work to fill the other IT position with revenue sources that do not hit the general fund. And we owe the board a conversation about IT projects that are coming and what that will do to internal service rates as they need more staff and support to fulfill those projects, and where that's going. Because, Sherry's in a position where the more departments ask her to implement, the more support she needs to maintain that implementation. And I think we can do a better job of framing for the board what's the full cost, the true cost of an implementation with ongoing support and staffing that she's going to need long-term. And some of the organizational internal rub is if others are if other departments are not getting positions approved, but then an internal service fund department is getting their positions approved. It just doesn't create a level of fairness, but we have to have that conversation with Sherry about if she doesn't increase her positions, then we really won't be able to move forward with IT implementations, which further hinders the work of departments.
So what do we do about revenue to cover the cost?
Well, that's where we have to track the impact to the general fund in the internal service rates and making sure that we can cover it and that we're planning a couple years out so that we can anticipate what that amount will be.
Yeah, we still need money coming in. And
I agree with you.
if sales tax is down and we have added no retail outlet, it's gonna stay stagnant. It won't grow.
I agree with you.
So, I mean, do you have another source of income, a golden goose? What do you got?
No,
I don't see that we've got it.
Yeah, Wednesday we'll talk about additional funding opportunities. I think the commissioners have seen those, so there's no golden goose in that discussion, but we will definitely lay that out and talk about how that's going to impact 26, 27.
I would also add, if I may, that this is exactly why not all of the central service requests are recommended as a yes.
Because we're trying to make sure
Well,
that
boy, there are a lot of yeses on this one sheet. A lot. I hate to say what it adds up to, but I think it's gonna give me a heart attack.
Well, all of the yeses are reflected on the slides that you're looking at here.
Yeah, and there's a component of yeses that apply to additional, have additional revenue coming in to support them.
Capital.
Yeah, capital
We see
requests.
a long list of capital
See
items.
that?
And so then the next slide, we have it's a list, technical corrections, not a name that I made up. I think you're all familiar with it.
Is that the proper pronunciation?
I don't
Errata.
know.
It's a name that the state uses.
You have to say it with a little attitude,
That's right, a little sass on that.
a little fast, yes.
All right. So that's basically technical corrections that happen every single year. Keep the books and accounting clean and appropriate. Budget team, I don't know if you want to speak to anything.
Some of them are requests that maybe when they were being entered, they keyed a figure in wrong, or they transferred funding from the wrong fund. So there's some slight corrections along those lines as well.
Do any of them impact general fund?
Sorry.
General fund impact?
Yes, there's two. My apologies. One is you received a presentation last week from Tara and the HR team on the benefits increase and changing the preferred, what was that called? The preferred
Standard plan
standard
for
plan, yes.
benefits.
Thank you. And then at the very top, you'll see that there is an entry for emergency management for a state homeland security grant placeholder.
Comes with
It does come with
grant money.
revenue from that grant as well. So those are the only two general fund impacts here.
And Commissioners, as we,
What line item, which
The
one was
first.
the first one?
The first line, and then if you go to line 8, so under fund, they both start with a 00.
Thank you.
yeah, and Commissioners, part of this discussion is to hear from you, whether it's information that's not presented, that you need or you want to have presented to you, or information that you need presented in a different way to help from today till Wednesday, you understand what the recommendations are and how we're suggesting to proceed.
So, just looking at this spreadsheet,
Yeah,
looking at no's, just a random example, Public Works, I see 2. Or actually, there's 3. One of them is reappropriation of salary line from 2024 to 2025 for Fir Tree Road Trailhead Parking Access Project. What are we gonna make of that? I don't,
can you give a detail on that?
That's a technical adjustment. The way Public Works does their budget, all of the salaries and benefits are in the operating costs. And they annually, remove the salaries that would be tied to that project, and it gets shifted over.
and we don't want them to do that, or,
We should want them to do that one. Is that one marked no?
yes.
We'll need to look at that one.
And then Kellogg Drive Northeast Culvert temporary repair. Temporary repairs of culverts are usually high priority items.
I thought we already approved that.
It says no.
Thought we already approved that one. Do you folks remember that? I thought Kellogg one we approved.
I don't know why that would be, no.
That's so too.
We'll have to look at
I have the
that.
same memory that you do, that we approved it, but.
Yeah, we'll check. If it's been approved, then
Well, I was wondering, like, maybe there was a general fund impact in some way, and that's why.
do you have any background on that?
Not on that one yet.
The thing about culverts is a general rule, if you don't fix them, they wash the road out, and then that costs a lot more money.
So we'll get a follow-up on those two.
We'll follow up on both of those between meetings. We'll also work with the department to make sure we understand the information, so it's not wrong information or confusing.
This is a side effect of PC Connect not being fully operational yet.
And is that getting close?
Well, we have to,
Oh, sir.
It's a work in progress.
Yeah.
It's going to take us months to dial that in as we are working with our vendor. And in January, there will be a rebuild of budget module. We know these are trying times with requests, not enough funding to support all the requests. So our team is happy to either here in the meeting or as you dig into this information, any questions that you would have, we will round those up. Our plan is on Wednesday to come back and to highlight any of the information that was asked for to be reviewed, to highlight any changes that that review might have made, and then to go over a very similar presentation, which will have, if we go to the last slide, the action would be to move to approve the preliminary 24-25 midterm budget. And that would be the recommendations. That's not what we're asking for today, but we're just highlighting that's where we would go on Wednesday morning.
Commissioner Edwards.
So if we were right, just if, Commissioner Menzer and myself brought up two issues that maybe they're not listed accurately, I guess is the best way I can put it. It's there, it's that way because of this problem we're having that we don't have a fix for immediately. I mean, if those are just two things that we just kind of inadvertently, well, we kind of remember this deal or that deal. If there's 10 others like that on there, how would we know that mistakes aren't being made? I mean, is there anybody on the budget team that can look down and, oh, well, yeah, I see that one's been approved, or yeah, we did that, or that's wrong?
It's a
Because
fair
I
question.
can't look at it
Sure.
and come up with that answer. I mean, I might spot one or two things, and then I'm not sure my memory bank is working properly even.
Yeah, I think what, and I'll let Robin speak just a second. I mean, fair question. I think, Commissioner Menzer pulls two, and those two don't have a ready response for. We're happy to go through and scrub the list, And I think the team has and will continue to
Do
do
you have
that.
the capability of doing that,
Yeah,
though? I
we-
mean,
We do.
We have, yeah.
It just, it takes a lot longer in the current environment than it normally does. So, but we're committed to making sure that the information is accurate. Robin?
So I would make two remarks. First is that, this particular process this year is greatly condensed due to the challenges of TC Connect. Just to have a operational system at all, we delayed things 2 months, and the team would have had July and August to sort through all of this, and instead we've compressed it in September. So there's that, and then Commissioner, you may recall, we've had a conversation on this in the past where the budget is comprised of thousands and thousands of lines of information. And there's going to be a few that are not right. And we actually have a pretty good track record. I'm very proud of the budget team. And when we do catch those few things, we bring them forward, and that's the errata list. We bring them forward in amendment to make the fix, and, but there's going to be a couple of things out of the thousands of lines that we look at.
I'm not questioning the staff at all about would they do the right thing or are they doing the right thing, but how do they even do the right thing if the machine kicks out the wrong number? And you don't have an immediate alarm system that goes off or doesn't come out in red or something. I can't comprehend how we can keep control if those are the unknowns that we're faced with on a regular basis.
It's not on a regular basis. This
No,
is
but
a
until we
unique
get this fixed,
situation.
Well, yeah, and that's.
and we're talking in January, we might get it fixed, or we might get something. That's a long time for letting mistakes dwell and not being,
Yeah.
I don't know the answer. I'm just asking the question.
Sure. Anytime you do a system migration, there's always challenges with data. That's where we have our vendor who's come out a couple weeks ago and spent 3 days with staff going over information. We have continued work, but there's a lot to do. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. It is a huge strain on our team gathering information, and there's departments like Public Works, Public Health, who have a lot of different revenue sources, grant funding. This implementation is a work in progress. I think things are going in a better direction now, but several weeks ago, very, very challenging because the system was not responding the way it should. And we're working hand in hand with the auditor's team to look at information, flag it. It's part of the reason why this information got to you on Friday afternoon is because the budget team is re-looking at every revenue source, re-looking at every expense. They're going through things to make sure that items are not being missed. I think it's also creating a lot of workload for the auditor's team. Darren, who normally can step in and do things fairly fast, is taking hours to do what would take minutes in the past. Some of that is expected when you're going into a new system, but this system migration has been pretty rocky, and we have our implementers' attention at fixing things, because before they wanted to walk away and say it's been all paid for. You guys are on your own, but thanks to the team that came together and got their attention and everyone working in part, they're now providing more support. So we will work our way through it. It's very challenging.
But each one of the elected officials, I'll just refer, Heidi was in here the other day and said, well, I got this number and this number, and don't know which number is right. And so I went with this higher number, thinking that's the more conservative approach, maybe.
Yeah.
And
I think
so are others faced with the same thing, or is
Yeah.
everybody kind of up against this?
yeah,
So
everyone.
they're having a hard time keeping track of what they get from us to be able to report back accurately, it sounds like.
Everyone is working through those challenges. To Heidi's comment, though, she found it on a Sunday, was reporting it on Monday morning. and the auditor's team would work that through in a few days to get them the right response. It's not that we're not getting to the right information. We are, because across the board, our elected officials and their staff and our appointed department heads, it's that it's taking so much longer to get that information.
Commissioner Fournier, got you. Next.
I don't really have questions, just comments, like when you guys talk about TC Connect and like how impactful that transition is, I try my best, but I know that I don't totally understand or appreciate how difficult this is, but I'm trying. So I just want to share that. Like, it's so foreign to me, but I hear you talk about it and I'm like, okay. So I'm really trying to understand the complexity of that. And then, if I don't have questions, it's because I'm trying to soak this all in, and this whole process is new to me. But one kind of comment I had is when it's showing the list of all these expenses, it's not always clear to me when they don't have like funding attached to them. Like I have a hard time discerning, and I know sometimes you guys mention it, but it's not always clear like what that funding looks like, where it's coming from, and if it's like a one-time thing, an ongoing thing, and so like that in my like understanding is not like fully baked either.
Sure, Commissioner Fournier, we're happy to maybe before Wednesday morning, the team can go over in detail with you what does have funding behind it and what doesn't. I think if we go back a few slides, I think it may be slide 3. Oh, slide 4, sorry. I don't know, Robin or Summer, if you want to speak to the request, at least on the general fund side, which does have funding, which doesn't.
Sure, so under the highlighted line, it says offset by revenue. Those totals for 24 and 25 are backed by either grant revenue, contract revenue, as you spoke to earlier, Commissioner Fournier, with the contract with Tenino, or maybe some type of reimbursements. And by reimbursements, I mean there was a request in here for the clerk, and there is some reimbursements there between the different offices. The one-time expenses in 24 outlines the required housing repayment. That doesn't have any revenue backed for that. And then the ongoing expenses are going to show you what we're recommending that you fund going forward, and those things will continue into the future. That $225,000 is the amount that the coroner's office really needs every year to maintain the expenditures tied to the service that he's providing. And that is also reflected in the 25 impact and the 4.17 million, along with the COLAs that are either there because of the contract obligations you've already agreed to, or the placeholders. And then the Amendment 1 rollbacks are not ongoing revenues, but essentially it's money coming back into the general fund because the board may make the decisions to reverse decisions that you made in the first amendment to fund those two particular items from the general fund.
And a couple of things we can do for you, Commissioner Fournier, is go through the list on slides 3 and 4 and just asterisk which ones actually make up the offset to revenue. The other takeaway we have is from the spreadsheet that we provided to Commissioner Edwards' request, just list out the dollar amount that each of these requests represent, that you understand when something is saying no, as well as scrub it, because I do believe that culvert project is underway, so we have to understand what that request is related to the culvert project and why they said no. It's not that the project isn't going forward, it is going, but there might be requests associated to it that we have to just take a look at in detail.
Well, besides the dollar amount, I mean, to me, following up on what Wayne is asking for, I'm gonna go back to say page 6, and that's budget recommendations, all other funds. So TCOM has got for 25, 306,000
Yep.
there. And I mean, I know that comes with funding, but maybe everybody doesn't know that it comes, it comes with its own funding source. We don't have to dig that out of the general fund somewhere.
Right, that's why these budget recommendations are all other funds, meaning that they're not part of the general fund.
But even that helps us have an understanding, I think, that there's money attached to all of, these. It might come from general fund, might come from elsewhere, but it is coming. Because at some point, and maybe I'll use the coroner as an example, if we don't have the money out of the general fund, where that's gotta come from, then something has to give. I don't know what that is exactly, but maybe he only does half as many autopsies as he's been doing. And that comes with its own problems.
Right.
If he was to do that.
Yeah, and just to be clear, slides 6 and 7 all are from other funds, meaning that there's funding to cover those recommendations, otherwise they wouldn't be brought forward. None of these on slides 6 and 7 are from the general fund, with the exception of the position requests in,
Central services.
Central services.
Internal service rates.
Summer, you have something?
Yes, sir. Thank you. I just want to point out, and we're happy to send it again, that there was, as part of the original packet of information, an operating recommendation summary for the operating costs and the capital costs. In essence, that recommendation summary, this is a higher summary or a more condensed summary of the summary. So the bigger packet has the narrative information, the funding sources, if it's backed by any revenue, it has all of that additional information here. Because this is a new report out of the new system and it's a little bit busy, we thought it would be best to provide you with something that was a little more condensed and higher level, in addition to the detailed report.
I'd also be happy to sit down with.
yeah, any of the officers.
This won't help Commissioner Klaus or Fournier, but for the three of us, we had last year's exercise and we asked for kind of like, what's the must-do list, And what I'm seeing is that this is basically that same thing, but just formatted a little differently.
Yes.
But it's that same thing that was so helpful to us to feel like this is stuff everything's discretionary, but this is a lot less discretionary. And then we can look at the other things. And so I'm going to throw out just another line item, looking at the spreadsheet. Sheriff corrections, contract increases for medical services and inmate training. That says no, and usually the medical contract increases, we don't have any choice. So I'm wondering how we get to a no on that.
So the sheriff will need to pay those costs, but in a $20 million budget with reversions, he should be able to make up that small amount. So we're basically recommending that be absorbed.
Got it.
Even that, though, with the new FTEs, how many more people in jail? Where do those expenses come from? So there's some trickle down, if you will, on everything that we're doing.
And I think that's where, when we look at 26, 27, building that budget, the foundation by which we build it on has to look at a picture that keeps us and our cash reserves at a point where we can move forward without going into a deficit. Because when we go back one slide, I believe it is, you see that red line continues to go up. That line goes up without adding anything addition. So that would be as if there's no request. It's just, that's the inflationary amount of that red line going up. Well, we hope that green line goes up as well, but if things don't perform the way they need to, I hope they do. I hope they outperform what they're performing now. But when we budget in 2% and we get in sales tax and we get 1.7, 1.6, that creates the bigger divide takes place. And then when, as you're mentioning, Commissioner Edwards, I think what I'm taking away, the theme of your comments and questions are, it is going to be increasingly more expensive to run this county government because of inflation. The answer is absolutely yes. Before we add any positions that are needed or that are requested to get the job done. I would say across the board, both for elected and appointed departments, folks feel strain under the current workload. And so this is a challenging environment because our county and the business is growing. And when it comes at least to the general fund, if the sources aren't growing with it to keep pace, it's hard just to match inflation, let alone to increase positions because we just don't have the additional revenue. So that's where structurally we'll look to start a conversation Wednesday afternoon about what's some direction that.
Don't we have to always be thinking of a solution and making suggestions? What is that solution?
That's what we'll be doing Wednesday afternoon, yeah. Today, our solution is.
To give us a headache.
Bring some Advil to this meeting. Our solution is to get through the 24-25 budget with only recommending what we believe is the bare essentials for 25. It gets us with an adequate cash balance, and then immediately look to the building of 26-27 because we cannot have that forecast stay in place long-term.
Commissioner Mejia.
And I would really just would like to thank you for this approach because it really puts the board, it puts departments and elected officials under a lot less pressure, right? And it gives time for preparation. And I was really nervous of having to go through a cut exercise again, knowing that TC Connect is still ongoing. New leadership, it was just, I was feeling a little antsy about it. So I appreciate this approach of being mindful of all of those circumstances and just giving enough time for everyone to kind of prepare of what is to come, right? Like we obviously cannot avoid this for long, but I think it just gives everyone a little time to kind of prepare for that.
And our recommendation will be, as we look at 26-27, to have a quarterly update on revenue and expenses that feed into what we are bringing in on the revenue side, especially if we decide to go after any additional revenue opportunities that we haven't at this point. And the reason why we'd want to do that quarterly is because if we start to realize more than what we forecasted, then we can have a toggle approach where some of the measures that the board has put in place, we may not have to activate them to the duration of time. So we don't lock in, this is a 2-year, whatever measure that the board were to say to contain the budget. But quarterly, if things are performing better, then adjust the forecast and then there can be some decisions that are made to the next quarter, and we just keep our eye closer on that. And that way, I think to some of the comments and what Robin said, we know this is a condensed time frame, and it's our sincere apologies. I don't think anyone wants to put you in a place where you're having to digest this much information in this short period of time. If we do this quarterly, I think it'll give us ability to align some of the conversations that we're having about fund balance, revenue, and even where the departments are at their spending, so that we can keep track of that closer tabs. I know that in the past, there's been some wonderful tools that have been put out, that have put into play. We look to reactivate some of those tools and do some more work sessions on that. So that's the
That's the end of the pain for today.
end of the presentation. We are happy to meet with any commissioners. See Amy Davis for your allocation of Advil. Needs a headache.
What fund does that come out of?
I think you gotta bring it from home and put
Foundational
it in
Public
there.
Health.
There you go. And then we look to answer any questions from now until Wednesday morning, and do any research we need to do, and then bring that back, and we'll start with a summary of the research and any questions we had, and then go through any changes that would have been made to the presentation to the recommendation.
Is there when are we addressing the issue about the Capitol Lake Chutes Estuary funding source?
Well, we have an update Amy Davis was able to connect with our legal team. Amy, do you want to provide the update about, you're talking about whether or not the funding can be used out of stormwater funding?
Foundational Public Health, stormwater, I mean, just, what information do we have about the availability of different fund sources to fund that obligation that's being proposed for us to commit to tomorrow?
Yeah, we've been able to do some of the research on the stormwater fund, the foundational public health. We're still researching that. Amy, do you want to speak to the stormwater fund?
Can I think Summer may have a good idea. She reached out to Travis.
So, yes, I did communicate with Travis, and he indicates that for the most part, the fund is an allowable, an allowable use of that fund. Brandon was requesting some additional time to do some research on his end. We had a small chat this morning, and Travis and I have yet to fully engage on the public health funding option, but he knows that that's coming. I was trying to gather my own information on that and send that on.
Travis had done the research prior, and I think we had paid a small amount for, was it a study? Yeah, out of stormwater funding, and so he reaffirmed his analysis that it can be used, and he didn't see any problem with that, so.
And then what does that short the county from doing in the future?
The stormwater, we have not had that conversation yet.
But it obviously will short something,
I don't know what that fund is able to handle.
because that's a new drain on the system, whatever funding it is.
Commissioner Fournier?
I just want to say if that is something that's going to be proposed by staff, that the funding be used from stormwater, whatever kind of legal analysis that's been done, whatever kind of advice that is being given from legal, I would very much like that explicit and like in writing and, spelled out right there in front of us how it's able, why it's able, like I want that nailed down very much, please.
Yeah, we will go ahead and ask Travis to put that in writing then. We have emails, but I hear what you're saying, Commissioner Fournier.
Yeah, full transparency, all the answers prepared tomorrow, because there's going to be questions, I'm sure. And I would like it nailed down by legal, or us nailing legal down before we get to the point where we're asking the question.
Right.
Please.
And in the interest of moving this item forward, it is on the agenda for tomorrow. I don't know, well, we will not have the research done on the public health funding side of it. And I don't know that we could, I don't want to put Travis in a bind. He has emails, but to put that into a formal memo is going to take time. So if the commission wants that before making a final decision, my recommendation would be to pull that item and save it for the following board meeting. Just know that the folks from the state are earnestly waiting. I think we're going to be the last people to round up our signature. And if we push it for...
And I just might point out, we're the poorest and the least available resources available to us than any of the other jurisdictions. So I'm with Wayne 100%. We better know an answer before we make a commitment.
No problem. Amy?
Just a note that there is an executive session tomorrow during agenda setting on this item as well.
So we can make the decision at that point.
But when it comes to an executive session, and then we can't talk about anything that went on in the executive session, I think that ties our hands about letting the public know for what Wayne is asking for. I think what he's asking for is very legitimate. And I think we should have it in writing. We shouldn't just have an email, oh, I've looked it over, it looks okay.
Sure.
And oftentimes the prosecutor's office doesn't want to talk about something that is in doubt. I've been around long enough, I've seen the cases got lost several times. When we appealed them or when they got in front of a court, you know. So it's nice to have something to look back on and say, well, here it is, right here.
Yeah, the way that, you know, we get our legal advice is it's still uncomfortable to me. And there's already been a couple times where we've, you know, on advice of our attorneys, and then it doesn't work out well for us, and then we're left there holding the bag all by ourselves. And, you know, like, we're just referring back to conversations instead of referring back to some document that, you know, shows why we made the decision.
Yeah, and staff are fully supportive of getting that in writing and working with our legal team. Just being sensitive that, that product could take time, and so, like you said, mentioned, Chair.
I'm all in favor of taking it off if that's what it takes. We're not obligated to cut our own throat because the state wants to do something.
Sure.
And that's the way I look at it, that we end up cutting our own throat, getting in a rush.
Is there, I mean,
Is a 10-year process a rush? I'm sorry, but like, this is not new. This has been an ongoing conversation for over 10 years, and I will not get into it right now, but
I'm only specifically talking about the use of stormwater funds for this. Like, I don't know if that's a new aspect of it, but if that's what we're going, if that's what's going to be recommended, all I want is the analysis in writing that's saying that it's okay, because I know that with some folks that's a controversial proposal to use those funds, and if that's legit, then that's legit. I want it, you know, I want that somewhere published.
I would just remind the public, if anyone's upset about that, we had multiple presentations like 5 years ago about how stormwater funds were going to, there was staff were proposing to use them for a series of habitat restoration projects because they connected to the issues. They were legitimate to be used for that. They had the financial capacity to do that. And there was no crowd of angry people in the boardroom, and we gave the thumbs up unanimously, and they ended up, I think, not pursuing the couple projects that they had lined up. But it wasn't because we said they couldn't or they shouldn't or it was inappropriate. It was just for other reasons. But to me, this is right in line with that same type of usage. You know, and again, I'm not looking to commit stormwater funds. I just want to know that when we were discussing this all along the way, we were thinking, okay, first of all, we don't know what funds we're going to use because this is an obligation that will be paid in the future. But I wanted to know that because counties are under-resourced, and we do find ourselves, like right now, in tight times with the general fund, I wanted to know that we had flexible options. And so that's what I'm looking for, is just, and stormwater I knew was one. I wanted that confirmed. Sounds like Travis is confirming it. I don't know about foundational public health. If that's also on the table, all the better. Gives us more flexibility when the time comes. So that would be good to have. Whether or not this has to be approved tomorrow or in 2 weeks, I don't know that there's anything binding us to, or I mean, if it takes 2 weeks to get all those answers, I'm fine with that. But I just want to see, you know, what's the extent of our financial flexibility so that the public knows kind of what options are on the table when we come to that point of having to contribute.
Yeah. And I'm right there.
I'm with Commissioner Mentzer on that. I really very badly want to quote the Hamburglar after him talking about we will. What was it? I will gladly pay for a hamburger or tomorrow for a hamburger today. How's that go? The future fund. Yeah, it's like just knowing where the money's coming from and knowing it's legal. If that takes 2 weeks.
Gladly pay you Tuesday for a hamburger.
Yeah, that's what it is. He was channeling the Hamburglar.
We're not getting any hamburger today. This is like 10 years down the road.
Yeah. And staff have no problem with doing the research and coming back, I just wanted to be sensitive that I don't want to put the legal team in a bind to try to get something quickly when it's going to be heard tomorrow, so, yeah.
Okay, well, we'll see how that unfolds tomorrow, and then we may have to take an action. Anything else for today's morning agenda? Okay, then we're back at 2, is that correct? Okay, adjourned. Thank you.